Hello everyone, this is Kythe with Planet Destiny, here to exercise my totally legitimate doctorate in Destiny lore by taking a look at some of the deeper stories of Bungie's brilliant universe. Since their inception, the Vanguard have existed as more than just a political voice of the Guardians in the last city's consensus. They have stood as a symbol of strength, protection, and wisdom that all people can look to in times of strife. Those chosen as Vanguard leadership must shoulder the burden of encompassing the entirety of what their respective class is viewed to be. Of the three classes, this task may be the most difficult for the Titan Vanguard. Titans are strength and safety. They are the wall that keeps the darkness at bay. For decades, Commander Zavala has been this wall. Eternally vigilant and unbreakable, Zavala has protected the people of the last city no matter the threat, from brutal attacks by the Fallen to the vengeful return of the Taken King. The shield he extended over the city has been battered and bruised, but never broken. Until the Red Legion, that is.
But Zavala! They're attacking the Traveler!
The Traveler waits! We protect our people, at any cost!
Gaul and his legion are thus far the only foes to ever breach the city's walls and adopt the strategy of attacking the Traveler directly. For the first time, Zavala was forced to choose between the safety of his people and the safety of his god. But he made the wrong choice. Electing to focus on evacuation may have saved hundreds of innocents, but the loss of the light led directly to the final deaths of thousands of Guardians and civilians, each death adding another weight upon the Titan Vanguard's shoulders that can never be lifted. In an instant, Zavala's identity as a Guardian was shattered while his faith in the light cracked ever so slightly. Over the next year, that fissure would only widen. For the first time in centuries, Zavala was completely alone. In the calamity following the Red Legion's attack, Ikora and Cade were missing, perhaps even dead, and he was left with a group of refugees all looking to him for guidance. Though his spirit was nearly broken, Zavala tried to maintain his role all the same, tried to be what the people needed, but somehow every decision he made always seemed to lead to ruin. He retreated to Titan with a group of lightless Guardians only to discover an infestation of Hive, causing the deaths of dozens more under his command. If it weren't for the intervention of the young wolf, the already legendary Guardian who would soon come to be known as the hero of the Red War, the lightless Vanguard might have met his end on Titan's broken rigs. Finally given a glimmer of hope in the form of the Guardian, Zavala was able to shove his doubts to a dark corner of his mind where they would remain, silent but festering. Once Gaul was defeated and the Red Legion expelled from the city, Zavala resumed his Vanguard duties immediately. He had come face to face with his own mortality, but the bravery of the wolf had inspired him to push through, risking everything to reclaim the city he had spent his life protecting. Though on the surface he remained stoic as ever, his doubt remained, fueled by the now awake Traveler's continued silence. What Zavala needed more than anything was a sign, some hint of hope, anything that would allow his torn spirit to heal. There would be no healing for him though, only more pain as time went on.
He had the worst jokes. Even worse timing. I wanted to laugh. I really did. We should have been there. This is not your fault. This is on the head of Uldren Sov. But if he thinks what he's done is the end, it's not. It's the beginning. We're going to fight him. Do you hear me? All of us. Every Titan. Every Warlock. Every Hunter. We will take the Reef by storm. And then, we will mount the head of that son of a bitch on his precious throne. For our fire team. For Cade.
No,
What did you say?
we are not an army. We are not conquerors. We are Guardians. We need to keep our eyes here. On our home, our people, the Traveler. The reef was lost the moment it lost its queen. So if another Sov wants a stretch of lifeless rocks, let him have it.
This is Cade we're talking about. For us to do nothing is
Say it.
cowardice.
I refuse to bury any more friends.
The murder of Cade 6 was the final blow to Zavala's already sundered soul. Whereas Ikora expressed her grief through wrath, Zavala is left with only weariness and sorrow. He retreats into himself, terrified of making another blunder like that of the Red War, and so forbids any pursuit of Uldren Sov. With only 2 Vanguard remaining and the last city still recovering from the reverberations of the war, Ikora had no choice but to accept Zavala's decision for the sake of a unified Vanguard, at least in outward appearance. But the Wolf, as much a friend to Cade as Ikora and Zavala were, had no such obligation.
Uldren Sov is mine.
Zavala would watch as the person that had stood with him through the hardest of trials turned his back in open disobedience for the first time. As it would turn out, Zavala's choice would be revealed as the wrong one once again when it became clear that Uldren presented a much more significant threat than was first thought in the form of Riven's curse. Because Uldren was given the time he needed to open the door to the Dreaming City, Riven's and thus Savathun's plan to trap the Awoken Citadel in an endless cycle was able to be fulfilled. Though Zavala reversed his decision and declared the city's full support for the Awoken struggle, he did so with the knowledge that he had made yet another mistake. Now Zavala gazes at the traveller, his heart and mind full of doubt. Unfortunately, his diminishing faith would provide an opportunity for malevolent forces to try their hand at corrupting him. One such force may very well be closer than anyone could guess, as is the case of the Ahamkara skull hanging above Shaxx, the one Eris Morn had insisted he get rid of due to its danger. The following lore entry comes from something within the tower itself. If that skull holds even a trace of an Ahamkara, as their bones tend to do, its effects could prove disastrous. Ahamkara have proven to be more than the sum of their physical parts, as seen by the varied use of their bones by Guardians as armor. The remains, hanging so openly, could be anything, including a window through which dangerous entities could peer through, should they know how to look. I see him looking over the side, toward his traveller, head bent. He is speaking softly, but I can hear him. Anyone who is listening could. He waits for a response, and I do as well, tense, curious. He stands attentively, this loyal dog of a man. It is no time at all for me, but for him, the hours creep by in silence. I am ready to choke the voice of his traveller if it answers him, but there is nothing. He tightens his grip on the railing. I feel something shift inside him, and a new possibility presents itself. Again I press against the sockets. The net creaks softly with my eagerness. Someone approaches and he turns his back to his traveller. There is an exchange obscured by the Rubicon thrash. He is given reports. Hope bleeds from him. He gives the messenger a token of his faith. They accept it without understanding its meaning. He watches as they leave. There is a hollow place in his center. It is beautiful. I return warily. I do not see him, but I hear him. He speaks to all with a voice thick with grief. I must learn how far I have been set back. I reach to him tentatively. Strength. I push and feel only sweet, soft rot. I am delirious with pleasure. It gave them no answers. It was a reflex, the spasm of a dumb muscle. A song of joy rises within me. Now. As Zavala questions his faith, the pyramids spread their influence ever wider. They will whisper promises and offer gifts in an attempt to draw those with doubts just like Zavala's own to the side of the darkness. Perhaps as an instinctive reaction to his own temptations, Zavala steadfastly refuses to allow Guardians to make use of the power the darkness offers in the form of stasis. Yet once again, Zavala is finding that his authority is not what it once was. More and more Guardians, starting with the young wolf themselves, openly make use of stasis despite the Vanguard's official stance on the matter. More than just being circumvented, Zavala is almost entirely ignored. As he claws at some semblance of control in the face of the overwhelming forces arrayed against him, he finds his grasp slipping more and more each day. And as for the Traveler, it has repaired its physical damage, even reached out to the crow and the young wolf in the form of Hawkmoon. Yet to Zavala it remains as silent as ever. Even if the commander resists the temptations of the dark, which speaks openly to all Guardians, it does not guarantee the survival of the city he's given everything to protect. The dark future warned of by Elizabeth Bray illuminates the worst of possibilities. Elizabeth's alternate future stands as proof for what Zavala already fears. He fears that nothing can be done to stop the coming storm. It cannot be reversed, destroyed, or even weathered. When it arrives, it will tear apart everything he has left. When the Brays showed up to what was left of the tower, they found only death and rubble. Zavala remained, broken and hopeless, while Ikora's corpse rested somewhere below the wreckage. Perhaps the worst insult of that future is that Zavala is not even given the dignity of dying in the defense of all he holds dear. He is crippled and stripped of his light, yes, but alive all the same, left to wallow in his failures. Elizabeth stated that despite her numerous efforts, those events have always come to pass. No matter what she tries, it always ends with her holding Anna's corpse in her arms. This time, though, things are different. Darkness is being wielded in tandem with the light, rather than corrupting. Does that mean there is hope that the storm can indeed not only be weathered, but beaten back completely? Perhaps. But if in the dark future Zavala stands firm, even as everything crumbles around him, what a cruel irony it would be if it is in this new future that he falters. One thing is for certain, if Zavala is to endure the doubts that plague him, he must not stand alone. Luckily, he may no longer be forced to do so.
If anyone is listening, Sagira is. She sacrificed herself to save me. From them. From the High. I'm tracking the creature responsible for Sagira's death. I will find it. I will end it.
Zavala, I need you to send the young wolf to the following coordinates. I won't wait.
A blue flash, a change in air pressure. The day isn't done yet. Zavala looks up as Ikora lands in his office's threshold. Is now a bad time? A silly question. Ikora can see the wariness hanging on Zavala like mist on a mountain, but it feels right to ask. A habit from breezier times. Zavala gestures for her to sit, but Ikora shakes her head. I have a request, she says, moving toward the vista behind his desk. It's a favor, really. Managing the hidden has never been a simple task. She begins as Zavala joins her at the window. And now that we need them more than ever. They need you. His immediate affirmation is firm and reassuring despite his own exhaustion. Of course, I'll handle the rest. But she can't accept it. In all your spare time? She chuckles softly. I think a better plan is for you to take on an assistant. Ikora fights to keep her face neutral as she presses on. One who has experience in times of war, who understands the Vanguard's role intimately, especially when it comes to making decisions that may be unpopular. Now it's Zavala's turn to chuckle. Not many candidates with those qualifications. Saint 14 perhaps, and... He stops short, the faint smile evaporating from his face. You're not asking me to make Osiris my assistant, are you? Ikora clears her throat, briefly overtaken by the urge to transmat far, far away. Landing in a nest of angry hive would be preferable to finishing this conversation. Advisor is probably the title he'd prefer. I take it you haven't discussed this with him then? A gentle admonition. Ikora can't bring herself to meet Zavala's gaze, but his sigh tells her enough. Can he be relied on? Zavala asks finally. A wall does not keep out the rain. Osiris's voice rumbles in her head. She closes her eyes, back in the stone garden earlier that day. They had been talking about the darkness, and the strength to keep it at bay. But before that, Osiris had handed her a message, one he couldn't bear to read, which was just as well because it contained, amongst other things, an all-caps indictment. He is not as strong as he thinks. Ikora? Zavala's voice draws her back to reality. He wants to help. Ikora forces herself to look at Zavala, let him see her disquiet, her desperation. Anything to convince him. He needs to help. Zavala meets her gaze. For a moment, neither of them say a word. They simply look into each other's eyes, into the eyes of the only other beings with the weight of the Sol system bearing down on their shoulders. At last, he breaks the silence. Very well. In times of great peril, sometimes all that is needed is an anchor to keep oneself from becoming adrift in the current. Osiris could serve as this anchor for Zavala as the metaphorical seas become rougher. Ikora appears to have asked him to take Osiris on as an advisor for the benefit of the former warlock Vanguard, who himself has just lost his closest friend in the form of Sagira. But it may be deeper than that. Ikora knows Zavala. Their friendship goes back longer than many of the city's residents have even been alive. She sees the responsibility weighing down on her fellow Vanguard, the weight resting upon his shoulders. Sagira couldn't have known, but her warning, he is not as strong as he thinks, is applicable not only to Osiris, but Ikora does know. Perhaps together, Zavala and Osiris can find the strength they need. Is strength always the answer, though? Certainly there are those that believe this to be the case. Lord Saladin, one of only 2 surviving original Iron Lords, seems to think so. When Empress Keitel arrived in the Sol system in the wake of her father Callus's disappearance, and the arrival of the Pyramid ships, Saladin was brought on to lead the offensive against Keitel's attempted annexation of Earth. To the Iron Lord, the value of politics expired when the Cabal Empress demanded Zavala bow before her. The only solution in his eyes is a brutal and utterly complete slaughter, crushing what's left of the Cabal into splinters so small that they can never form so much as a strongly worded argument against humanity again. While Saladin is certainly not alone in thinking this, it is not the only viewpoint. Zavala preferred a less heavy-handed approach, erring once again on the side of caution and honour, preferring not to sink to the enemy's level, while Osiris looks at things from a more logical viewpoint, choosing not to cloud his opinions with subjective morality, nor with blind rage and cruelty. These differing philosophies create a new form of strife in the Last City. While the Vanguard may need to present itself as unified, Zavala's War Council, far from the public eye, does not require such appearances.
When Keitel has a knife to your throat, will she thank you for your diplomacy?
Though it may seem monstrous, utterly slaughtering the enemy, targeting their leaders to demoralize them, executing survivors of battles following victory, Lord Saladin's ruthlessness is not without merit. Twice during the period of conflicts with Keitel, Zavala has almost faced his final death. Not through honourable combat and righteous victory, things the Empress claims to value, but through subterfuge and underhanded tactics. Scion assassins have targeted Zavala's ghost using light suppressant technology twice, and both times it was only the timely intervention of the Crow, known as Uldren Sov in his previous life, that Zavala was able to escape unscathed and with his light.
Have you ever felt someone's eyes watching you, Guardian? You might not believe it, but I knew he was there before I saw him. I turned, and there he was, Uldren Sov, his spirit haunting me. Then he shouted a warning, and something snapped in the trees behind me. I spun around, my gun in hand, before I realized I'd done it. It all happened so fast. A Cabal assassin, one of Keitel's, no doubt. When I looked back for Prince Uldren, he was gone. Was it a troubled spirit? A hallucination? I wasn't sleeping well before. Now I'm not sure I will at all.
The motives behind these attempted murders are not as simple as they might appear at first glance. Osiris stated that employing underhanded tactics did not seem to be within Keitel's nature, an assumption that may very well have proven right when the Empress herself assisted in foiling the second assassination attempt. If Keitel was not behind the subterfuge though, then who was, and why? One consideration is, of course, a splinter group or rebellious general within the Cabal forces, seeking to gain favour or stop the fighting without further friendly losses. While certainly possible, the true reasons could be much more sinister than that. As has been discussed, in recent years Zavala has made no shortage of questionable decisions. Decisions that have resulted in catastrophe, choices that could be construed as cowardly or inept. Were they understandable from a leader in his position? Of course. Yet empathy may not have been on the mind of whoever orchestrated the Titan Vanguard's removal. Perhaps someone from within the city believes that Zavala is unfit to lead, that he is too weak for command, and that the cruelty of war requires a ruthlessness that the current Vanguard is unable to muster. This individual may believe that peace through diplomacy is a far-fetched dream, and that the only true solution is a return to the tactics of an older age, an age of iron.
This isn't the Zavala I know. He was a fighter, a survivor. The city has made him soft.
It is without a doubt that Zavala is a changed man, but does changed mean weaker, unfit to lead? Not necessarily. Though cracks have formed in his resolve over the years, the commander has not yet broken. Rather, it seems as though he has even begun to heal. Though no doubt filled with a roiling sea of emotions after seeing Crow's face revealed following the second attempted assassination, it appears that Zavala has chosen to walk the path of forgiveness. Staring down at the visage of the man that took one of his closest friends from him, Zavala had the opportunity to lash out, to condemn or even kill this phantom returned from the grave. Instead, he offered his hand, a physical and emotional gesture of acceptance. Rather than crumbling as a result of his grief, Zavala is branching out, accepting help, and gaining allies. Forces lurking in the shadows no doubt will still attempt to corrupt or remove the Vanguard altogether, yet they may find that this task is not as simple as it once was. Zavala is no longer alone. He has allies to help him when his burden becomes too heavy. Through them, perhaps, his resolve can stand firm against the approaching tide of chaos. Let us just hope that Zavala's allies remain as steadfast as him.
Without trust, we become like the Cabal, fractured and consumed from within.
The Cabal are not guided by reason. As far as I can tell, neither is the Vanguard.
It would be in the Cabal's best interest to maintain a ceasefire. It would be in our interest, too.
Clever. Was your plan solely a proposition to placate Zavala's ego and buy time for a proper counteroffensive?
An interesting observation. Were that true, would you have a contingency plan?
I will. Soon. And when the time comes, I would go boldly if I knew I had you on my side.
Then go boldly, Lord Saladin.
Thanks for sticking around, everybody. If you have your own theories on where Zavala and Osiris might end up in the future, feel free to comment them down below. If you like our content, make sure to subscribe for more lore videos, guides, and reviews. Once again, I'm Kythe with Planet Destiny, and I'll see you in the next lore deep dive. I'd like to take a moment to thank the artists who graciously allowed us to use their work in this video. To both Brian Munkus and Gammatrap, you have my deepest appreciation. The socials of these extremely talented artists will be linked below. Make sure to check them out for more outstanding artwork.